Funding Month, presented with Oracle for Startups and American Express, recognizes the stories, lessons learned, and best practices shared by founders and funders around the world.
So, welcome this April, the 1st April SGVirtual in Luxembourg. We are pleased to have Patrick KERSTEN with us. And while I will give a few housekeeping notes, I would like to invite you to use the chat function to tell us your questions you have to Patrick, and also what you are looking for, how we could eventually assist you. Because the mission of Startup Grind is to give startups and companies everywhere the education and opportunities they need to build, grow, and scale their companies. And because we believe in making friends, not contacts, and we believe in giving first, not taking. Further on, we believe in helping others before helping yourself. That's why just shoot in the chat function what you are looking for, how we eventually could assist you. And now, for this April month, where the topic is on funding in general for resources, we are very pleased to have Patrick KERSTEN with us today, who has gone really the school of hard knocks of an entrepreneur in Luxembourg, but also with the global links. So first of all, thank you, Patrick, for joining us for this SGVirtual.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I guess many people, maybe there are some attendees who don't know you, but they know what you have done or what you have been involved with. So let's see a little bit, because I mean, we met each other, was the internet heydays a little bit, let's call it like that, was before and after the bubble in Luxembourg. And you were involved in one or the other project. With which project did it start? Or venture?
Well, we were a couple of guys freshly coming back from university and moving back to Luxembourg, and it was mid of the 90s. Internet was just getting started, and some of the team were working at posts selling internet access. And so it was a very small community, and we got started just trying out things. And one of the first things which really worked out was launching a job board. And the job board rapidly became very, very popular. And in 2000 got acquired by Monster. It became Monster Luxembourg. Now job boards are from another time. Today, job boards are not really what they used to be. But at the time, it was either you were looking into the paper Wednesdays, Saturdays, and or you were going online and be able to set up your job alert and get the jobs sent, which was at that time quite a phenomenon. Monster then just said, well, we're only interested in the jobs business. So they took half the team. And my colleague became country. This happened, mid of 2000, just before the internet bubble burst. And of course, these American guys had the idea to pay us with shares. So that was kind of hard learning money. I mean, learning money was already being paid on how to build something, but it was actually, we were just middle of the 20s and having fun. And but then when you had your first exit and you were very excited on dealing with the lawyers and auditors, etc., and then still having the deal happening, having the internet bubble bursting then was not really what we would have expected. So in Luxembourg, you don't grow rich from what you do. It's just too small. So Monster just came and they took half the team, and the other half was left with me, and we had like but not really earning money with them. So I launched a real estate website, which is called At Home, and it's still around today. The growth was slower. So I had my one afternoon, I just had to let go almost everybody apart of 2 guys. So there was 3 of us left from 10. And then within months, we became profitable and we started having profitable growth. And end of 2000s, well, the time was ripe for moving over. So we planned the next exit. At this time, it was, well, bigger groups were around already in real estate. And the one who got it was Rupert Murdoch and his news corporation. And the Australians called realestate.com.au. So they took over the company. And for me, from a private perspective, it was the right moment just after a dozen of years of being independent, having founded a family, just to spend some more time with the family. And when there was trips, I had to do a business trip to Australia. It was also pretty fun to do. And just to discover what it was like to be in a corporate environment, where I quickly found out to be 1 out of 700 companies. And inside the company, or the group of companies where you operate, just to represent 2% of revenue, wasn't really that exciting. And every year there would be other international managers coming and just telling you how to do your job. Whereas it's just, yeah, but we had tried to grow internationally and did get some support. And then there were changes in CEOs and style of management. And time was right for me to do something else, which then I did in 2010 of 2012. And early 13, Doctina was born, which is another platform to bring together offer and demand at this time, and to create transparency. This time in the mental health sector. At the time, well, online booking was not really as popular. I would say COVID has really accelerated that trend. Now you just book everything online. But I think even before COVID, it had become a norm for quite some people in Luxembourg. Before COVID, we had like over 250,000 of the Luxembourg population, so close to 40% who had already used it, different users. Today, there's close to 200,000 registered users on Doctina in Luxembourg. And with Doctina, we from the start, it was not as much of a mature market. So we went, we just crossed the borders. And we said, well, all the projects happening at that time, early 2010s, were just in big cities, Berlin, Paris, London. Initially, the concept comes from New York, launched 2007. So again, just not a copycat project, but some good inspiration. And knowing that, especially in medical, each country has its own mechanisms for reimbursement, and so there's not one market, but it's true also in other areas, but especially in medical, everybody is very much aware of his own constituency and taking care of his own people and on different ways. So Doctina quickly grew to be in a very good position in Luxembourg. So we expanded organically to Belgium, to Switzerland, to Netherlands. And then we thought we could accelerate, and we started acquiring other companies and really became one of the major players in the Benelux region, but also in the DACH region, like the Germans call them, which is Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. We overstretched probably, so we had to scale down, and our shareholders asked to become profitable, which we have become last year. So which for me was the moment after having done the project for 7 years, just to hand over to one of my co-founders, and they are still going from strength to strength. Just announced yesterday that they are powering the Brussels vaccination campaign. So over 1 million people are now getting vaccinated through Doctrina in Brussels, where we have also signed a couple of hospitals. So yeah, sometimes you're more successful in other markets than your home market. Again, very interesting project with an impact. So I may be associated with some household names. Let's see how long they will prevail. It's not been the objective, but it just happened that way.
Great. So if we go back a little bit in time, and then we take the early days, I mean, with the job board and so on, because I remember that then, let's call it the internet ecosystem, was still a very technical, focused minded sphere. There weren't so much the marketing side and design side, which was only coming up because the idea was, okay, you have an internet site, and it was more like a digital, a virtual business card, which you have, and then only started that you could register and so on. And with the job board, were you more did you develop it from scratch, or did you use some existing tools? Because today you can take tools left and right, and then you can assemble. I mean, you have the idea, and then you look for the tools and assemble them. But back then, I guess that you had to do a lot of development per se by yourself. I mean, in the venture or not?
Yes, it was all homemade. In the sleeping room, the garage, or the basement. Our first offices were in the basement, and was quite kind of fun. So it was just like some friends doing it, colleagues doing it at night, but they were having daytime jobs. So same for the servers. The servers were just lying around there with open heart surgery all the time, because you would have the hard disk lying there, and it was not recommended to stumble upon it, because else the website was down. Yes, those were different times, but I mean, we all were having also modems with a capacity of 2.8 kilobytes per second, and we were happy when there was ISDN came and it was 5.6. It was like a revolution. It never stopped since. So the good thing is that there's much more to come. There's much more projects to be launched today, and very differently. Recently have been giving a helping hand to Charles from Silicon Luxembourg to set up his job board. It was just done in 3 clicks. I mean, you have job board software available off the shelf. What took us years to build, he has something much better in responsive design, with all the tools you want to have as an employer, and very easy to use. Same for the job seekers. So it's impressive how all this technology has matured. And there's interesting. There's been recently I did read an article saying that there is no such thing as competitive edge in software, because every feature eventually will be copied.
Yeah, will become the commodity. But that was on technical. But how did you were mentioning also that you were working in the garage and during the evening and so on, and that you had your day jobs, or most of you had your day jobs. How did you, as it's funding, it's a little bit the topic, but how did you finance or the resources in order to develop it? Because on the one hand, on the other hand, how long did it take to get the first paying customers?
We were, I mean, the early projects, it was just family, friends, and fools. And fools, just family and friends. There was no such thing as business angels, etc. So we managed to get some money from SNC. They had CDPME loans of 25,000 euros. It was a huge amount. But it was a loan, so it had to be reimbursed. So we really quickly focused on generating money. And actually, the team was built with half the people with an IT background, engineering background, let's say, and the other half of the people with a business school background. So it was very much in our focus that we wanted to make money out of it. And the earlier we would make money, the faster we'd grow, and the more we could make and launch new projects and even more projects.
And
which we did. We actually all started more projects than any of those that became. There's many more of them that never reached the break even or got accepted.
And also, I mean, you mentioned SNCI and then also close, but let's say so the 2 Fs, not the 3 Fs, but if we go to the revenue model, I mean, you were saying, okay, you were forced between quotation marks to be profitable or to make money. As you mentioned, it was really early days to get with a job board. I mean, it was on paper. You had some of the big dailies or weeklies and where you looked at it and so on. Was it hard to get the acceptance of the market at that time?
No.
Not really.
No, well, it was just a compelling proposition. You had to make it compelling. You also had to be convincing. So it's never been like putting it online and then just waiting for orders to come in. It doesn't work that way. And also in the early days, you had to go out and do some active sales. Now, the cost structure of a print media is a very different one than for digital media. And that's still true today. And also the reason why the budgets, the advertisers are never going to pay the same amount as they used to pay for print for any campaign they do on the web. And so, yes, we just came in by being rock bottom cheap and by offering much more than the paper could offer. In real estate, it was the chance for you to have like a 3-line ad in black and white, or a full screen with pictures for the same price. Actually, you could have 5 for the same price as a small printed ad. So it was playing with different weapons. And yes, the audience was maybe not the same, but the price was not high. And if there was an audience, then it would be an audience that would not go to the mainstream users, but and therefore also maybe a more educated and with cash, and so that's and also was true for jobs. Also, they wanted to get access to people who know how to use internet and the computer. It was important to know how to use a computer in those days. That you had, end of the 90s, you had private computer programs in the big companies, because people didn't have a computer at home. So they would, the HR would have the idea, you know what, we're not giving away computers, but you can get the computer for half the price, and we will give you a credit for the other half. And we will take that 500 francs or 25 euros off your salary every month, so that it becomes affordable to buy a computer. The price of computers has not changed very much since 25 years. At that time, buying a computer was like 2,000 to 2,500 euros. Same price as today, but the salary structure was a very different one, because the minimum salary was like 25%. So you needed 4 months of minimum salary, 4 to 5 months of minimum salary to buy a computer. So
that's on one hand. And then, I mean, if we go now to the exit you had, I mean, with Monster becoming interested and so on, how did you go about it? Because I guess you started something and it was then, okay, then you had a big player approaching you, eventually others as well. How did you deal with that? I mean, on the one hand, one is probably proud of it, that one got the interest. And on the other hand, okay, did you think about negotiation, or did you, because you were how shall I say, overwhelmed by the big player and you didn't negotiate much? Or was it real that you said, okay, no, let's do it, let's squeeze them a little bit and so on? How was the approach? Because if I remember, you were one of the first in Luxembourg who got approached by an international player on that.
Well, we didn't really get approached. We put up the company for sale, and we worked with the Big Four and some lawyers to make it happen. So it was an organized process where the pitch deck was set up, and there you would have a selection process of bidders until, with the goal of having 2-3 bidders at the end that will outbid each other, but also to find the right one that would bring the company to the next level. It happened at a time where either the shareholders would have had to invest more, or to partner with some industry players. So the second option was the favorite one for the shareholders. And that's how it also happened in the second time. And probably it's going to be history repeating. It's a bit of a pity that apart from a very few people in the digital world, everything is short-lived. It's not something that you can leave to the next generation, because who knows what's going to be around in 10 years or 20 years. I mean, all those fortunes of IBM have gone, and there's many more examples.
And then when moving to your the next venture you had, which was in the real estate business, if I'm not mistaken, they also, how did you go about it? I mean, did you, when you started it off, did you use again your own cash, or I mean your own resources, or were you also saying, okay, let's leverage a little bit the resources, then so we leverage also the risk to start it off?
Well, all the ones that had a first exit also put a bit money on the table again to get started, but a bit, not huge means. And so we started almost from scratch again, but with more experience and with the knowledge of what had been the first success. And it's been a very similar job because it was classified, so that it was the same target. This target was still Luxembourger Wort, and we know how to chase them for jobs, so we would do just the same for real estate. And yes, and it worked out pretty much the same.
Let's say, so did did it help to accelerate the path of the venture with the experience you got from your first venture?
Yeah, definitely. We had grown by some experience.
Mm. And then when you were in the real estate, I mean, you were classified, it was more or less the same vertical, let's call it like that. You build everything from scratch. And when did come the time when you said, okay, man, now let's look for an exit? Did you have always the idea of an exit in mind, or was it more a philanthropic approach of doing a venture for doing the venture?
I think initially we were just in for the venture. That these markets would consolidate, well, yeah, we could have foreseen, but it was not the point. The point was to create something relevant for Luxembourg, and be a profitable business, and just earn our own living, not having to work for a boss, and so be digital. Mm. Because we just loved everything that was going on, and in parallel you had the chat world with Luxusburg, and you had different projects, Party.lu and Alex and etc. And you had Visual Online growing as an ISP, and just like today, you have local startups very active in the market. You have Voice of IP. We had EuroDNS in parallel, and the data centers. Today you have MixVoIP, being a brilliant team and exporting their know-how. You have companies like Skiddles in the software, or Salon-Key, which are homegrown teams, getting a start here in Luxembourg and then expanding because the market is just too small here and it's just big outside.
And then if you look then at Doctena, if you look at this, let's say the three ventures we have been touching upon, the job board, then the real estate, and then the Doctena side, the needed resources, the requirement of the initial to kick it off, to start off the ventures, as I understood, the job board was quick and dirty. Let's will not be negative, but quick and dirty. Then the other the real estate classified was a little bit the same way, but you had more knowledge, more experience. But in Doctena, you were really addressing a different market. I mean, it was not how shall I say, the market of goods, fast-moving consumer goods, or consumer goods which you would buy and so on. But it was health. It was really a different market. Did you go into that market with better resources, with more, let's say so, how shall I say, a war treasury or war chest than the other two ventures? Or was it just, okay, let's do the ventures, let's see what we need, and then we kick it off?
Well, it's always been testing ideas. It's so we did our MVP, minimum viable product, was of course a bit more professional, and so on the second venture we had worked with some outside development team, but it was like budget, and the result was also something to be refactored. And well, we started immediately as soon as we went live and we saw that there was a market, we started redeveloping everything. For Doctena, I had much more experience. So the three founders were pretty senior. One of the three founders was had been my CTO and CIO for years. Well, together we had the IT consulting company, which I'm running today, which is called Vesperia. And so we gave mandate to Vesperia and 6 months to build it. And we just put a couple of guys on it that would build it. And we know we would have a good foundation. Then afterwards, it just depended on how quickly we would sign up the doctors. We know that doctors are not innovators. That's not what you want to hear from your doctor. You want your doctor to reassure you. You don't want your doctor to tell you, you know what, I'm going to try something new on you. Let's see how it works out for you. Apart from COVID, I mean, but it's not what you expect from the doctor. You want your doctor to tell you, take this, it works. So it's not an innovative environment. And it still is a lot of work to convince the doctor to change habits. So and then as we do, like with every project, you know where it starts, you never know where it ends. And the needs which are being expressed, the opportunities that come to you, you never know until you meet them, until they're there. So we know that the path afterwards would be just a very different one. If you'd have told me about COVID and video conferencing or video consultations, I mean, we were thinking about it 2 years ago, but that we would have to introduce it early 2020. Yeah, there was no scheme for it. We know that we wanted to do it, but that it would accelerate and be accepted both on the side of the patient and the doctors was something nobody was dreaming about, because the government paid for it. So as they were not getting paid for it, no one wanted to offer it. Which means not getting paid was because the patients were not getting reimbursed. At least in the Luxembourg markets, patients are not used to pay for the doctors. They get reimbursed for it, but taking the full cost is not very usual here, especially if it's just for comfort. So there's been a very different setup, much more professional and much faster. We also hired IT and salespeople, but still the balance of both, because the more IT people you have, the more you also need revenues.
And then also for, let's say, for Doctena, for starting it off, I mean, for the funding or on the other resources, were all those who provided the resources involved in the project, or did you also have external funding which got shares and so on, but were not so much involved in the venture? How did you approach that one?
Well, today Doctena is mostly in the hands of investors, because with each acquisition, the company needs additional funds to grow. So, so there's been multiple rounds. So we've been raising for years and years. So it just depends on how quickly you want to grow, and if you want to grow faster than your own revenue build up, you need some extra capital. The people that bring capital, they want something for it. They are taking a risk and they want a reward.
Exactly. And on the other hand, I mean, what because I mean they take a risk and they want generally want equity. I guess you are talking about equity investors or eventually loans and so on, eventually to bridge it. But on the other hand, how did you go about it not to be diluted too much? Because I mean, you are raising funding on the one hand, you also need to provide something so that the new investors say, okay, you're on par.
Well, people will only invest in growing companies. And as long as your company is growing, you are increasing the value of the company. If you are a garage selling 5 cars, or if you are a garage selling 5,000 cars, you don't have the same value for a garage.
But was there not, were you never afraid of being diluted by external investors?
That's part of the process, and that's just about negotiation. Who has the stronger position in negotiation? No, I mean, we've always been confident that a lower stake of a bigger cake was more interesting than having a big stake in a small cake. And I mean, when we reached 10,000 doctors in Doctena and managed 1.5 million visits per month, and if we can see what we reach today, clearly that's something which would not have been able to build without the investors.
There's one question which I got here is regarding the height of the investments. Would you say that today you, depending, of course, depending on the venture, that is myself adding it, but would you say that you need more funding than a few years back? If it's in, as you say, if you're talking about a digital venture and so on, what is your feeling about it?
My feeling is that generally you need less to get started. And then you will need more if you want to expand and grow outside of Luxembourg, because there it becomes really crowded. But to get started, it's just so easy these days. If you want just to test your idea, there's tools around, really well done, that you can get for a couple of euros or dollars per month. So getting started is not a difficult part. The difficult part is being consistent, growing the business, building some metrics. It's a mature market. Investors have seen pitches, thousands of pitches. They have a lot of experience in discovering true gems, and so on those steps, if you think you can do it all yourself, you have to be pretty good. So unfortunately, that's the case. I sometimes meet founders of projects that are afraid of accelerating. And I think the word is accelerating. And we all have windows of opportunities. And if you're too slow, you just might miss it too. So it's about finding, you might find, no, somebody else can do it. Okay. I mean, just as I said, like any cool software feature is going to be copied. Look at Microsoft. Microsoft rolling out Teams last year. What is it? It's a copy of some commonly used software by the geeks community, of Slack and other things. They've just taken the best out of each software and made a new version out of it, and made it acceptable. And there's some Slack, there's some Zoom in it, there's some all of these tools which the geek community has been using, or the startup community has been using. So there's no such thing as a sustainable competitive advantage in software.
And it's like Peter Thiel is writing in his 1-0, you need to become the monopolist in your market.
Yeah, but that doesn't work.
For him, maybe. No.
Well, not even, because you're in the meantime, you have a couple of internets. We're linked to the American internet here in Europe, but look at what China is doing. They have so many skilled engineers, and they come up with business models which are totally like Pinduoduo, or you have group buying, they're much bigger than Amazon. They're doing much better. So it's really interesting times.
One question about the timing. You already touched upon it, but the timing of funding, you touch upon it, and by saying, okay, in the beginning you can do it quick and dirty, you don't need so much, but then if you want to accelerate and so on, you need to raise. What would you recommend somebody who is just launching his or her venture? Should they think about what you have just said, that in order to grow, they would need more resources? Should they factor it in already in the beginning, or what is your guess about that one?
You never do these projects alone. Well, most of the people don't do them alone, and it will just unfold. If together with your team, you have the feeling that you can deliver on high growth, go for it. If you're not sure about your product or your sales process or your product delivery, the onboarding of your customers, or if you cannot, the customers don't want to change software all the time. I mean, in digital, it's very much software, okay? Just to give you an example, when I was selling to hospitals, at hospital size matters. I had one of the CIOs telling me, well, 2 years ago, I wanted to introduce IoT. Well, all the startups that I had scouted, they're gone. And how did I reassure him and sign him afterwards? I just said, look, we've been around for 6 years. Look at the shareholders that we have. Look the number of doctors. Look the volume of appointments that we managed. Look at our responsibility. Do we have any other choice but to deliver? So we have grown so big that even if I fail as a person, there's a team. Even if the team, there's shareholders who will see value and will make sure that the business continues. So it's not too big to fail, but it's reassuring to know that you have some structure. And that's very difficult, especially, for example, if you are in a sector with limited players. I'm thinking of the fintech, who would rely on the Luxembourg ecosystem. You get maybe a POC, but look at the effort that the DigiCash team did to get started. It took them years to federate all the players and to have a critical mass. And if you depend just on a couple of players, it won't work. Like 10 years ago, I started, I almost launched, no, I did launch a company. I started a company to do what is now common, which is online home reports to get a value of your house. It failed. The market was not ready. The market would have been the banks. So I didn't wind it up. I liquidated the company myself. But today things have changed. There's now another business model around it, and it works. So it's about timing. It's about also if the market, the credibility of who's bringing it. It's not always easy, depending on the market that you choose.
There's another. I have two other questions. The two last ones which have come in is you mentioned, okay, especially for Doctena, in order to grow, you needed to acquire, you needed to get investors, and so on. Would you recommend, or according to your experience, if one is looking at an investor, that one should take the time in order to look if there's a good fit with the investor, if it's only for investors, if it's only for funding? That is one of the questions, because there are several, how shall I say, kinds of investors. You touch upon it. You have the 3Fs, then you have the business angels, then you have equity investors, you have corporate investors, you have institutional investors, and so on. What would you recommend somebody who is in, okay, she has started her venture and is running on full speed and now is looking to accelerate? Should she grab the first one who gets her a decent deal, or should she look also to the fit of the investor with the venture?
Well, your question is about smart money or just cash. I mean, if you can get smart money, take it. It's even if you can get more money, but without the skills, it is worth to having some input. It then also depends on how much time your investor is ready to invest, and on what corporate governance you want for your projects. Corporate governance is not a luxury. It is useful. It will help you see what you do in every day, because when you are just running like hell, it's good to have someone just get you the helicopter view of the project. And if there's a couple of them, the more heads think about the same idea, the more it will help you also better see where you're navigating, in which direction. And also those people have the long-term view that you tend to lose when you're in everyday business. So when you go for smart money, you can go for smart money short-term or long-term. It's ideally it's the mix of two. The short-term is the people that will help you set up in the phase where you're just in. And long-term is if you know that afterwards you want to raise more, you can have people who come with the right network and the experience, or who have themselves really deep pockets and funds, and for just put in a bit of money to see the project. Most investors will take years to get trust, to build trust. Okay, it's a long process. If you really want to raise in millions, you have to know the people for a couple of years. They need to track you. They need to see that you are delivering over and over again. That's the only way. So you announce something, you deliver. You announce something else, you deliver again and again. And that's how you will build trust, and that's how you come to patience, and you can accelerate it. Now, if they're in the process, you get the right sponsor, like what has happened to the biggest competitor of Doctena, which is Doctolib in France. They had a first investor, which was Axel, which is London-based major top-tier VC, and they put in 20 million because there was a French guy on the board who liked the credentials of the project and the people doing it. And that's how afterwards those guys opened their network, and they got even more money to raise even faster. But they also delivered. When they said we're going to hit those numbers, they did hit their numbers. So it's a mix of two. It's like athletes. You get sponsor if you qualify for the Olympics or for the World Championships. But if you are known by the sponsor but you do not deliver, you're not going to get the sponsorship.
Thank you. And then the last one, which is asking, when you go for the exit, or when you have done the exit or are doing the exit, what would you suggest? What would you prefer? A quick exit where you really can step out of the venture, or an exit where you accompany the venture a little bit more and then slowly get out of it? What is your preference?
Usually you don't have the choice. It comes in negotiation. It comes in the negotiation, and the buyer will want to have some guarantees. And the guarantees are simply that, well, you don't get paid full, but you get some of the money only paid 1, 2, 3, 5 years later. And then either you trust them to reach the targets, and then you get your bonus, or you say, well, if my deal depends on it, then I would like also to be still involved, so that I can make sure that it goes into the direction which I think is needed for me to get that earnout. And so you don't really have the choice, unless you can just say, I don't care about the earnout, which is usually 30-50% of the transaction deal. So most people will want to stay on board until they have had the earnout.
Thank you, Patrick, for playing the game. And as usual at Startup Grind, the last question is to you: is what could Startup Grind do for you? How could the Startup Grind or the global Startup Grind assist you? I don't know if you are looking in, if you're launching new venture and then eventually looking abroad, or if you are looking for partners and so on. Is there something how the entire Startup Grind network could assist you with?
I'm not sure if it's really relevant to look out after assistance for myself. I'd rather have Startup Grind doing something for the next generation of entrepreneurs. I'm more of the old generation, so it's time to hand over to the next generation of creative young people with a lot of energy. And there's a lot of things happening and in Luxembourg, and initiatives like Startup Grind are really part of that process also, to share the knowledge. And what we're doing today, I hope, has been useful to some of the people listening. And I'm very much available if they have more questions later on. Feel free to share my credentials, and so that people can reach out to me also on LinkedIn if they want to. And but if some of the learning money of the elders can be reused in a world which has changed, and it will continue to change, I'd be happy to assist all newcomers for their ideas and help them get started.
Much, Patrick. So thank you, and also to the audience, thank you for having been with us. And as usual, there will be a follow-up summary coming, and also you will be able to look at it or rewatch it at our YouTube channel. Thank you, Patrick. Have a nice day.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Funding Month, presented with Oracle for Startups and American Express, recognizes the stories, lessons learned, and best practices shared by founders and funders around the world.